ready to learn about pro-social behavior?
Sure.
Ready? If you're not ready, we can wait. Okay. We can wait a while. We can wait it out. All right. Okay, we're going to talk about some theories, some basic motives for why we act pro-socially. We're going to talk about evolutionary psychology, talk about social exchange theory, and some theories for why we engage in pro-social behaviors. Is some theories for why we don't engage in pro-social behavior, and then talk about empathy and altruism, and maybe get into personality qualities. Okay, so when I say pro-social behavior, I'm talking about any kind of behavior that is intended to help other people, okay, and behavior that helps not just people but groups or society as a whole. And so I think deep down we want to help people, and we like to believe that we are helping people, but actually helping people is a choice that requires action. Okay, it takes resources. It's way easier to think that I want to help someone than actually get up and take the action of helping someone. Okay, and so the definition you want to take out of here is definition of pro-social behavior: any act performed with the goal of benefiting another person. So helping people involves like a cost. Okay. So when I'm engaging in like a helpful act, whether it be taking a friend to the hospital, or visiting a friend in the hospital, or bringing my friend who is sick soup, or the other day I gave my friend like a bunch of earplugs that I had, which was annoying because I had to set an alarm, like a reminder in the morning to like get the earplugs, like out of a box that had storage, and stick them in a Ziploc bag. But I had to find the Ziploc bag, and so like I just like prolonged it, like it took me like 2 weeks after she asked me for them, because it requires like a cost, like a cognitive cost. Like it's early in the morning, and like I'm just thinking coffee, 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 breakfast, breakfast, breakfast. Get in my car, listen to Paramore, rock the campus. Like that's all I want to do. Like I don't want to like get earplugs and put them in a bag. And so helping also takes up like time, as well as money, but not helping also has a cost. 'Cause I don't want my friends to my friend is using the earplugs because she has to take comprehensive exams. You guys know what comprehensive exams are. They're pretty much before you get a PhD, you have to take like a 6-hour exam, and that takes like months and months and months to study for. Okay. Has like 80 journal articles. Okay. And so she spends a lot of time in her office. Yeah, it's a lot of journal articles. I don't know if I've ever read them any. So she spends a lot of time in the office, like studying, and me and my friends. You guys know Nick Hurst. We are really loud. Like we're so loud. We just make jokes all day long. Like we even have like a basketball hoop in the room, like attached to the door. And we're just like banging like 3-pointers across the office, like balls getting everywhere. It's like,
we got in trouble actually. So we've been a little quieter, but and so like I feel bad if I don't bring these earplugs for my friend so that she can like block us out and actually study, you know. And yeah, so like we feel horrible. We don't want to like lose a relationship to the person, and like have and like not helping hurt us down the line. Okay. Um, and so altruism is an important term. It describes any behavior that helps another person, even if it incurs a cost to you. Okay. This is like the ideal case of pro-social behavior. And like the question is, does true altruism like exist? Can we be truly altruistic? Okay. Like maybe I'm helping my friend by giving her earplugs because I want to feel less bad about myself. You know, like I distract her all the time, or like her feeling some kind of like pain, um, like makes me feel bad, and then I want to like relieve that pain. And so reality is kind of like selfish motive to do something kind for someone else. You know? Do you guys think there's anything any such thing as an altruistic act? No, I think most people think no. No. TK, why do you think there is?
I don't know because I feel like for example, I saw this old lady. She was like in her 80s and she was begging for money this past weekend, and she didn't really know English, and I felt bad. And it was so cold this past weekend, so I could give her like $3 because I felt really bad, but she gave me a hug after, and I felt really good about myself. So I feel like when you give, it kind of like improves your own well-being.
So, and I don't want to turn this like an intellectual debate because I will lose. But like, were you gonna say something? Maybe were you gonna say what I was gonna say?
And like, I don't think there is a true altruistic act. Good, it's just like, we feel like we do this because we want to feel good in a way. Like even if you don't think about it, it's like unconscious.
Gotcha. So it really just boils down to feeling good.
Yeah, in a way.
So like making someone else feel good makes you feel good, and that's why you want to do it. Sarah?
Yeah, that's why I was saying that's the reward sense of it all. It's not like you're getting anything, but just the feeling of feeling good about it is its own reward.
And so, like, if we didn't have some kind of system that made us feel good for doing nice things, then we wouldn't actually engage in nice things.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so that's actually like the basis of like evolutionary psychology. Okay, that we were programmed to engage in pro-social behaviors to feel good about doing something and like doing something good for someone else, but only because it helps keep people around us alive and continues the growth of our continues like growth and of society. So I don't know if you guys taken a biology class, but sorry.
It's horrible.
That's all we're just complaining.
I did bad in biology. Yeah, I did so bad. It was like 10 years ago. I just don't remember. And the dude who taught it was like my dad's friend. My dad was a professor at the school I went to. It was like, so embarrassing.
Beautiful. Sounds like a great story.
Yeah, it was, thank you. I got a lot of stories like that. And so, Oh yeah, so like evolutionary psychology like predicts that we're more likely to help people the more related they are to us. Okay, so we'd be more likely to help a child from drowning than a sibling than a stranger. Okay, and you can actually like mathematically like map this out in terms of like your blood relation. Okay, so like a child would be like the closest, like share the most genes, and like a cousin would share like way less. And so why? So the reason why this is explained by kin selection. Okay. So we want people who share our genes to survive. Okay, like survival of the fittest. If we can't survive, then we want some way to pass along our genes so that people who share our DNA can survive. Does that make sense? Okay. Another reason why we help other people is this idea of norm of reciprocity. Have you guys covered this in any of your classes before? Okay. Is this expectation, it's an implicit expectation sometimes, that helping other people results in a higher chance that they will help us later down the line. Okay. So I actually have a good video I want to show you for this. You guys watch The Office? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Cool. Yeah. So yeah, it's not difficult to get. Dwight hated having. Andy and Dwight both hated having this expectation that they would have to like repay each other's favors, right? So they kept on doing favors for each other. They got really ridiculous. Okay, and so this is one way that we're programmed, or one explanation for prosocial behaviors. Okay, and so if we're programmed to help out our kid or like our family members, people who are closest to us, the idea is that this like evolutionary programming has been generalized to society, to an entire group of people. Okay, and so that we're also programmed to take actions that benefit the larger group. Okay, and this makes sense. Groups that help each other are more likely to survive. We're fighting a war. The group that has more warriors is at an advantage. Okay, they're also at an advantage if the people within that group are looking out for each other. They are cooperating. It is also advantageous for us to learn social norms, which help bind groups together. So, like the ability to learn social norms is like kind of like built into like our genetic makeup. Okay, and it's believed that added like gratitude, the feeling of gratitude, is also programmed to facilitate helping behaviors. Okay, such as reciprocity. Now, there are like two competing theories for why we take, for like when we decide to engage in a pro-social behavior. One is social exchange theory. Okay, and social exchange theory kind of treats humans and like good and bad like outcomes, like economic resources. And so we'd only partake in an action if the good outweighs the bad. Okay, and so there are different kind of benefits we can get. So if we help someone, that can lead to reciprocity. Okay, like expectation that we would get something good in return. We know, like explicitly or implicitly, that we're investing in a better future. Okay, taking pro-social actions also helps correct social problems that exist in society, which in turn help us. And we want people to do well. Like, you guys know Kitty Genovese, the person who was like maliciously attacked in New York City, and like in front of an apartment complex, but no one called the police. Okay. We don't want that to happen. But helping can also be costly. Like putting yourself in danger to help. Okay. And like donating money to a charity, like that literally costs money. And so the idea with social exchange theory is we only decide to help if the good outweighs the bad. Okay, if all the benefits from helping people outweigh the costs. But there's another theory that predicts when we help. But before we go over it, let me quickly go over the definition of empathy. Okay, that's the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and to literally experience what their experience. So when you talked about that, TK, I think is when you were talking about the homeless person you saw on the street. It sounded like you're literally experiencing like the cold that they were,
But at first I thought it was a scam. Like I thought she was like alive. Like I was like, oh, she's faking it. But then,
That's always my first instinct.
yeah. But I don't know. I felt bad after. Eventually, when I thought about it.
Did you give them money?
Yeah, I did.
Do you guys remember when we talked about the mirror neuron system? This is like a cognitive mechanism that explains empathy. So we have neurons in our brain that fire when other people take actions. Okay, so like if I watch your arm get cut off, I would literally like the neurons in my brain that fire, that would have fired if my arm had been cut off. Like some of those neurons actually fire. And so that is an explanation for why we can empathize with people. Okay, like we literally feel what other people are feeling. Okay, and so I talked about social exchange theory as one reason for why we take altruistic actions. The empathy altruism hypothesis says that if we feel empathy as a result of someone else's suffering, then the feeling of wanting to end their suffering, like whatever action you take as a result of that, is thought to be purely altruistic. Okay, and so what I'm getting at is we can. When we decide if we want to help someone, if we don't feel any empathy at all, then we'll only help them if the rewards outweigh the costs. Okay? However, if we feel a large amount of empathy as a result of something difficult someone is going through, we'll help them regardless of the pros and cons. It kind of strong enough force to cause you to help someone no matter what. And so just to go over that one more time. So we observe someone in need of help, and we ask ourselves, do we feel empathy? If we do, we'll help them regardless of whether it's in our self-interest to do so. But if we don't, then we only help the person if it is in your self-interest. That's the empathy altruism theory. Anton?
If you feel empathy for them and you feel their pain, wouldn't you also be trying to help them to end the pain in yourself?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point, Nick. I don't really know how to explain that. Like, the way I think about it is that, like, empathy, is such a strong cost that, like, there's, like, no other thing that can outweigh that, you know? And so, like, if we're feeling a good amount of empathy, then, like, we're not worried about the money, like, the time, you know, like the cognitive resources, you know, we will act on that empathy. So this study was done where they asked participants if they're willing to help like a fellow student who had fallen behind in class, and they manipulated empathy by telling half those people to think about the experience of the student's life, having gone through like a hard event. But for the other half of participants, they told them to try to be objective. Okay, and they also manipulated whether or not they would actually see the student in their class. Okay, I think they told them like, oh, but by the way, like you're gonna see the student, like she's actually in your class. And for the other half, they told them they would never see them again. So when participants were like manipulated to have high empathy, okay, it didn't matter whether or not they're going to see Carol in class, okay. They were really likely to help her, okay. But the students who were in the low empathy group, they only helped if they thought they're going to have to see Carol in class, okay. If they thought they were never going to see Carol again, they're like, whatever. I don't care. Okay? And so what this shows is that if we have low empathy, then social exchange theory predicts the results. Okay? Do the costs outweigh the benefits? Okay? The cost here is that you're going to see Carol in class. You know, it's going to be embarrassing if you didn't help her. You know? Over here, participants are feeling empathy. Okay? They are told to try and think about Carol's life experience. So they don't care whether or not they're going to see Carol in class and be embarrassed. They're willing to help either way. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah, so this pretty much sums up what I said. There are like individual differences in the amount of empathy you could feel. For example, some people have higher mirror neuron activity. So again, mirror neurons are the neurons that fire when other people are taking actions. Okay. And there's also, people who have had different life experiences or like different genders and culture can also predict like the amount that you'll take an altruistic action. I think we're going to talk about it. Okay. So men are more likely to act altruistically if it involves like a heroic act, such as jumping on a train track to help someone who fell in. Whereas women are more likely to act altruistically in like a long-term way, such as like helping like a disabled neighbor. And there are probably different reasons for the differences in how men and women act. Perhaps some of it is like physiological, like men are physiologically like their like upper body have more upper body strength. Men and women are socialized differently. Okay. And probably a lot less to do with actual biological differences. In terms of cultural differences, we're more likely to help people who we think are similar to us. And less empathetic to people we think are not similar to us. Okay. And this is called in-group, out-group. Okay, so people who we think are similar to us, we think that they are in our in-group, and people who are not are in our out-group. We'll talk more about this on the next slide, but also in another lecture. So yeah, we just have like a cognitive bias towards labeling people as being like in our group and other people as being in the other group. And because we're more likely to feel empathy towards people who we label as being in our in group, because of that fact alone, we are more likely to help people in our in-group. We'll talk about this more later. It's really rich area in social psychology. I have a video. I only took like the very last class. Okay, so we talked about pro-social behavior last time we were in class, and so pro-social behavior is any kind of behavior that is like in which you're trying to make a positive impact on something or someone or like society as a whole. We talked about the different theories for why people engage in pro-social behavior, because intuitively it doesn't really make sense, like, well, not intuitively, but like if you think about it, engaging in pro-social behavior doesn't 100% make sense, because it takes resources to do positive things for other people. It takes cognitive resources. It takes time resources. So why would we? We talked about an evolutionary argument. Okay, like the more so like the evolutionary argument is that we'll do anything that will keep our like genes from like reproducing. So on that line of logic, we might be more willing to help people who shared at least some sort of DNA with us. So we might be more likely to help our children or like a relative in general. And then extending from that, we may have like a proclivity to want to help members of our group continue and survive. And we talked about like normal reciprocity. I showed you the Office video, right? You guys seem like really consumed by your electronics today. every single person. Pay attention a little bit. Now, are you guys looking at your grades? Is that what's trying to calculate your grades? Is that what's happening? Feel free to shoot your hand up and ask me a question about your grade in the middle of me lecturing, so I won't have to answer the email later. Okay? And so, like, we learned that mood has an effect on pro-social, and now everyone's looking up at me, but, like, I'm not convinced that it's genuine, you know? Do whatever you want to do. Okay? So mood has an effect on pro-social behavior. So the better you feel, the more likely you are to engage in a type of pro-social behavior. Okay? And like that makes sense, right? Like intuitively, it would make sense. Like the better you. Okay, so why does that make sense? Why would positive mood help you, make you want to continue engaging in pro-social behavior?
You want other people to mimic your good mood.
Sure. You want other people to be like you? Okay.
Being in a good mood puts you in situations and also makes you create situations that puts other people in good moods.
Yeah, but why? You know. Well, so I think one explanation that you're getting at is like when we're in a good mood, it might like activate a schema. You know, like a good mood schema, and so I continue acting on that schema. You know. But I think another reason is that when we feel good, we want that feeling to persist, to continue. We want to continue feeling good. Okay, and so we know that if we continue doing nice things for other people, then that's going to help our good mood continue. You know, and so bad mood can also increase likelihood of engaging in pro-social behavior. And why do you guys think that's the case? Anton?
So if we're taking the extreme of depression as a negative mood, you could be trying to help other people to try and increase your self-confidence.
Yeah.
Self-worth.
Pretty much, yeah. I think it gets at it. Like if we're feeling bad, then we want to get out of that bad mood, like in some way, shape, or form. And helping someone might increase our self-worth, might make us feel like we're worth it. Okay. There are also what we call situational determinants for engaging in pro-social behavior. Okay, so the environment you live in actually has an impact on how likely you are to help people. Okay, so think about it in terms of like urban versus a rural environment. And there's a theory called urban overload hypothesis that said that people who live in large cities will be less likely to help people in need that they run into. Okay, and the reason for that is because people in cities are so bombarded by like bright lights, you know, people walking around, like stimulation in general, that they want to keep to themselves to avoid being bombarded by it. And that's called urban overload hypothesis. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. And another situational determinant of pro-social behavior is something called residential mobility. Okay. And that has to do with how long you've lived in an area. Okay. So the theory is that the longer you've lived in an area, the more likely you will be to help people who are in need if you run into such a person. Okay. And that kind of gets at the difference between in-group and out-group. Okay, so people who are we perceive to be similar to us in some way, we ascribe them to our in-group, and people who we think are different than us, we ascribe them to our out-group. Okay, and pretty much we are nice. We're like have positive thoughts towards people in the in-group, and we have more negative and less likely to help people in our out-group. And that kind of fits into a residential mobility that, like, the longer you lived in an area, the more likely you're going to see people who are part of your community as your in-group. And so if you see them as your in-group, you'll be more likely to help them. Okay. So speaking of pro-social behavior, we're going to talk about the bystander effect. You guys know or revisit the bystander effect. You guys know what the bystander effect is by now, right? So pretty much Kitty Genovese was murdered in front of a lot of people. I think a few apartment buildings, and no one called the police or anything. And it was real bad. Like the perpetrator even came back to her and did more damage, and still no one called. And so these psychologists noticed this news story in the New York Times, and at the time everyone was saying, "Oh my God, people in New York City must be horrible people." And they were like, "Well, maybe it's not that people in New York City are horrible people. Maybe this is a psychological phenomenon." And they called it the bystander effect. Basic idea being that the more people there are, the less responsibility each person feels to help. Okay, and that's called diffusion of responsibility. Okay. So now we're going to dig a little bit deeper into this. And I want you to know that there are many different reasons why the bystander effect can happen. Okay, and they each of them involve different steps that lead to the bystander effect, or different steps that need to be taken in order for you to implement help. Okay, so first you need to notice the event that's happening, whatever event that's occurring in which someone needs help. Okay, and then you need to interpret that event as an emergency, and then you need to assume responsibility of the event. Okay, and then you need to know the appropriate form of assistance, and then you need to actually implement whatever decision you made to help in any kind of way. Okay, so first we need to actually notice that the event has occurred. Darley and Batson in 1973 showed that. So they tracked seminary students because they felt like seminary students would have no problem helping someone if they were in need. And they put a Confederate, a homeless-looking guy who was pretending to need help in a doorway, groaning, this guy clearly needed help. And they looked at two different groups of seminary students, those who were in a hurry and those who weren't in a hurry. And they found that when seminary students were in a hurry and they were passing this guy who clearly needed help, they were way less likely to notice that he even needed help. So if you don't even notice that someone needs help, then how can you assume responsibility.
How do we determine whether or not they notice them at all?
That's a good question.
Because like, I'm just thinking like there's,
Well, so yeah, so there are four groups. You know, people who noticed. I'm sorry, people who were in a hurry, and people who weren't in a hurry, and then within each of those groups, people who noticed and helped, people who noticed and didn't help, and then people who didn't notice. Right within each group, I guess there's like six groups. So I don't know how they actually determined if people noticed or not. You know, maybe afterwards they asked them like, "Oh, hey, like we were tracking you. Did you happen to notice that person in the doorway groaning for help?" And maybe they're like, "Oh yeah, I did." You know, it's like, "Oh, we didn't help them." I'm not 100% sure though how they measured that. We can look it up.
this reminds me of another study somebody did where they dressed up a homeless guy on the street and like had him lie down on the ground.
Mhm.
Like, people noticed him, but just they looked up and acted as if they hadn't.
Good question. Maybe. Let me.
If you just look up.
So. So the second thing is like another step along the way of getting someone help, where there can be a breakdown, is this part where you have to actually interpret the event as an emergency. Okay? So maybe I see an old man in the door, like groaning for help or whatever, and he kind of looks like he needs help, looks like a homeless guy. But maybe I'm just like, oh, maybe this guy just fell, or and is like, or, I don't know, maybe this guy's just like humming to himself on the ground. Like maybe he doesn't actually need help. Or something like that. And so this is most likely like a phenomenon in which this breakdown can happen is called pluralistic ignorance. And this is basically when everyone is kind of like looking to each other to figure out if something needs to be done, but everyone is kind of dumbfounded and looking to everyone else. Okay, so everyone just has like a blank stare on their face. Okay, so everyone's looking at each other's blank stares and is interpreting that as, oh, like nothing's actually wrong, but everyone's just as confused as everyone else, looking to everyone to figure out what's wrong, and so they just assume that that nothing needs to be done. Okay, and this is called pluralistic ignorance. Okay, that makes sense. It's actually like an interesting phenomenon. And so then you have to actually assume responsibility. So you may interpret that this old man in the doorway is screaming for help and that he needs help, but then you actually need to decide that I'm the one who needs to take responsibility for this. Okay? And this is where diffusion of responsibility comes in. Okay? And think of it as like a mathematical equation. The more witnesses there are to an emergency, the less responsibility each person feels they have in helping the victim. So, the next phase, you actually need to know how to help. Okay? So maybe someone's having a stroke or like a panic attack, or a heart attack, and they need some sort of assistance, possibly CPR. If you don't know how to give CPR, so you're like, well, how am I gonna help? Like what am I gonna do? And so you don't do anything, and the person doesn't get any help.
Guess what? The guy's on his back or his stomach?
Yeah, he has a weird body shape. It's gotta be
It looks like
on
a
his stomach, but he has
His
a
head is
head.
turned at such
Yeah,
an
yeah.
angle.
He might just have a cracked neck.
Oh, God.
Mm.
Everyone just walks over his body.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what he really thought.
Yeah, nobody here knows how to help.
Fix a broken neck.
Yeah, yeah. So finally, like, even if you know what kind of help to give, you might feel like unqualified to help or afraid of the cost to yourself. Okay, so maybe you walk in on you walk in on someone getting like held up or I don't know, like held at gunpoint, and you're like, I'm not trying to get involved in that, like that's dangerous, and so you decide not to implement help. Okay. And like along those lines, in an internet chat room situation, when someone asked for help, the larger the group was, the less likely someone was willing to help that person who needed it. But you could counteract this by calling someone out by their name, like an individual. And so I guess what this is saying is that if you're in an emergency and someone is like choking on something or having a heart attack or looks like they like really need help, like you like literally point at someone and tell them to call the police. Like call someone out, because it takes the anonymity away. Let's watch this bystander effect video. Okay. Nah. Okay. So video games can have a effect on pro-social behavior. Okay. So they had two different groups of participants. One play a pro-social game called Lemmings.
It's lemons.
Lemmings. Do you want to describe what
It's
that's?
pretty much like the way that I could like look at them as like little troll people, and they all work together to build things.
Mm.
Oh, wait, I know that one now.
Yeah.
I
I remember it was a game on Super Nintendo.
Super Nintendo game. Okay, and then it had another group play Tetris. Okay, so then they put them in different scenarios where they had like the opportunity to help people, either pick up pencils, volunteer for research, or help a harassed female. And people who played the pro-social game, so the green bars, a higher percentage of them were willing to help people in each of these scenarios. Okay. The book also talks about studies where music can have a positive impact on pro-social behavior, the type of music you listen to. Okay. Yeah, just know about the bystander effect. Okay. Okay. So the last two chapters of the book are aggression and prejudice. And so we're going to talk about different what do you call it? Different definitions of aggression. Okay, and then probably next class segue into how it's related to prejudice. So aggression, just like a basic definition of aggression, is any like purposeful, intentional behavior aimed at causing physical harm or psychological harm to another person. And so an example of this would be the Columbine massacre, where like their like literal goal of the Columbine shooting was to cause physical harm. But that's different from instrumental aggression. Okay, that's using aggression as a means to some goal other than causing pain. Okay, for an example of this is that George Zimmerman, who said that his aggression was being used to save his community. Okay, so he explained that, or like he believed that, like he wasn't acting aggressively towards Trayvon Martin because he wanted to cause Trayvon Martin physical harm, but because he wanted to save his community. Okay, so instrumental aggression, we're differentiating it from just aggression, like regular aggression. So regular aggression, you're trying to cause pain. Instrumental aggression, you're trying to achieve some other goal other than pain. There's the evolutionary argument for aggression. And so first you need to understand that men are more likely than women to act in an aggressive way. And so the idea there is that if we're going to look at that in an evolutionary lens, that men are programmed to act more aggressively in order to help perpetuate their genes. And so if they're able to establish dominance, they're more likely to protect their mating partners, and so they're more likely to mate, and thus their genes are out there. Did you? So the book talks about gender differences in aggression. Okay. So males are more likely to act physically aggressive, but women are more likely to act passively aggressive. So there's more psychological aggression. Okay. And there's obviously like a difference in the problems that they both solve and that they both cause. Do you people out here ever act passively aggressive? Males and females.
I see that too often.
Yeah? What is one way? Sorry?
Like spreading rumors.
Oh, start rumors about people instead of just like saying something to their face. Sorry, silent treatment. That's a great way.
I've just never done anybody ever.
You mean like no one actually ever changes after?
Yeah, no, like every time I've seen somebody try to do silent treatment, either goes one of two ways. The other person will completely like just go away,
Mm-hmm.
or the person getting silent treatment will break their own silent treatment and just end up talking anyway.
Gotcha. But what if you like wanted that person to go away? Then when maybe that's
That's how,
Yes.
yeah, that's exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, like ghosting.
yeah. Man, that's really passive. Ghosting, yeah. That's like a new thing, isn't it? So there are different kinds of influence, like things that influence aggression. One is like physiological influences, and so there are different physiological influences that like aggression influences. One is alcohol. And the way alcohol, well, as you can imagine, there are many ways that alcohol can make someone more aggressive. One way, like alcohol, so alcohol is like a disinhibitor. And so, like one way that it can cause them to be more aggressive is to only react to like the earliest information, and to not continue to like analyze incoming information. So, for instance, like if someone steps on your foot, the only thing you're focusing on is that someone stepped on your foot. You're not thinking about, like subtleties. Well, why did this person step on my foot? Were they drunk too? You stop collecting evidence. And instead of coming to like a rational decision to why someone stepped on your foot, you are like WTF, and become aggressive. And okay, let's see. Other physiological influences of aggression are pain and heat. So Carl Smith and Anderson found in 1979 that riots were more likely to occur on hot days than cold days. And they also found that participants in the study were had a higher likelihood of aggressing if their hands were submerged in cold water. Okay, like really cold water. So frustration and aggression are related. So frustration is that like emotional discomfort you get from not being able to attain some sort of goal, or feeling like you're being prevented from attaining a goal. So they found that when they force children to keep a distance from their toys, they're more likely to play in like a destructive way with those toys when they're finally like given the opportunity to play with them. And so there's this frustration aggression theory that predicts that like not only does frustration lead to a higher chance that you'll act aggressively, but that the closer you were in attaining your goal before you were prevented in attaining your goal, the more aggressive you will become. Okay? So the closer you are to your goal, the higher likelihood that you'll aggress. If you're thwarted from getting your goal, and so they did this with this line cutting experiment, where they cut people in line, either like at different points. So either when this person was like far away from the cashier, or when they were like right about to buy something. And if someone cut you off like right as you were about to get to the front, then that was like way more likely to make you act aggressively toward that person. And so the way, and like one idea for how we like come to learn aggressive behavior is social learning theory. And this is the theory that people learn social behaviors like aggression by observing other people. And this is related to normative conformity, in that we go along with the group in order to like fulfill like the group's expectation and to like gain acceptance. And so like the famous study done with this was the Bobo doll experiment. How was everyone doing? Good,
Super
everyone.
good. Now that we're seeing you again.
Yeah, right.
Now in person.
I'm sure you guys are excited. This is the last
Oh, come on, guy.
day of class. What's
I
this?
said, oh, come on, guy.
What does that mean?
What? See?
Huh? What's happening?
I actually don't know.
You guys excited?
Yeah.
Sure. Last day of class. No. How many people are taking the final? Okay. Really, all of you? I feel like some of you are lying to me.
Why would
Some of you have like A pluses. Now raise your hands.
Also, why would you just try to get a better grade? Yeah.
Better grade than an A plus?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Why would you lie about taking final?
Type S.
That's cool. Type S?
Yeah.
What does the S stand for?
So I don't know. There's some grades where they have, like in some rankings where they have like, you know, A through F, and then for above A, there's like S, double S, triple S.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure where those come into play.
Mm.
But yeah, that's
Okay.
except
I didn't know that was a thing.
If anyone gets over 100, I'll give you an I.
Well, let's go.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
go.
Yeah, it does. You gotta
Let's do
you gotta
it.
take the class over again.
Like this asshole trying to overachieve.
Oh, you're being recorded. Only I can cuss. No. So the last chapter is on prejudice. So let's talk a little bit about that, and I think it involves a lot of the concepts that we've been discussing all semester. So prejudice is any like hostile or negative attitude towards people in a group based solely on the membership of that group. Okay, and there are like a plethora of different like aspects of someone's identity that you can be prejudicial towards, like ethnicity, gender, sexual preferences, religion, appearance, physical state, professions, hobbies. And so there are different components. So there's a cognitive component of prejudice. Okay. And so this is when you make a generalization of an entire group. Basically, take some aspect or some like attribution and assign it to every single person in that group. Okay, and this is kind of like a schema, right? It's like a schema, right? You guys see how I can make a schema?
Yes.
So we have like a schema for cars. Okay, we're like, well, all cars have tires. All cars have windows, and it works the same way with people who belong to a certain group. You know, all people who belong to this group, you know, are bad at driving or something like that. And the interesting thing about when we, you know, have prejudicial, when we assign to an entire group in like a certain attribution, is this concept of illusory correlation. So illusory correlation is when we think that there's a relationship between two events that are actually unrelated. And so let me show you an example of that. Okay. So there's also a behavioral component to like being prejudiced, and that's so we say like cognitive component. Okay, so we may hold a certain belief about like a group of people. Okay, I think that guy dropped his headphones. There's nothing I'll be able to do about it. Well, I can go get those headphones and just and then listen to music. Yeah. But like, but we also have a behavioral component, like actually acting on the prejudicial feeling we have, and we call that like discrimination. And you can uncover discrimination, okay? And TK can tell you all about that. With the IAT, okay, so someone might not be like it might not be desirable for someone to act in a discriminatory way in like a research study, you know, unless their tendencies are being measured like implicitly, like with the implicit association test. Okay, so you guys remember this? You get like good words, bad words, and then like so with the old people IAT, we had like old, young, okay? And when good words were paired with old people, TK was slower at responding to them than when bad words were paired with old people. Okay, and that's because her brain had an association between bad and old. Okay, so you can uncover. And I'm sorry, but
No, it's okay.
I'm not that sorry. And that's
You're prejudiced against her.
yeah. Don't give me the IAT. Yeah. And so prejudice can have effect on the victim. So like self-fulfilling prophecy. I think that's pretty. I hope it's self-explanatory. Can you guys explain how self-fulfilling prophecy and being or having prejudiced beliefs can impact someone of a specific group?
What do you mean, the person being prejudiced against?
How like maybe they don't actually behave in a certain way, but use self-fulfilling prophecy to explain how I feel like if I keep talking, I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. Can anyone see how Okay, go ahead.
Saying like a person in a certain group that is commonly stereotyped against or like has negative prejudices, the group has a negative prejudice towards, like even though they might not, or like okay, so they say they are aware of those prejudices, but they don't necessarily believe that they emulate those behaviors or characteristics. Then the self-fulfilling prophecy, however, might suggest that they would at certain times emulate behaviors or certain characteristics.
So let me explain this way. I'm pretty bad with well I don't think I'm bad, but my friends think I'm bad with technology. Okay, and so when I'm around them, I'm like they're making fun of me, you know, and like I'm expecting them to think I'm bad at technology, so I just kind of get like stuck on that, and then it's hard for me to actually concentrate on whatever technological device is in front of me, so that I mess up more, right? And that can be seen as a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? they think I'm bad, causing me to act bad, you know? And so related to that is stereotype threat. And so this is when apprehension from a prejudiced group or like a minority group causes them to behave in a manner that confirms the stereotype people had about them. Okay, and the famous experiments done here is they had white and black students take a standardized test, and with one group of students, they just had them take the test. And then another group of students, they reminded them that African Americans generally score lower on the math portion. The group that was reminded that like the African American students would do worse in the math portion, African American students actually did worse. The group that wasn't reminded, there wasn't a difference between the math scores on the standardized test. Okay, so simply by like making aware that there's a stereotype about you, it causes you to actually perform bad. Okay, in that area. And so the idea is that like the worry associated with the stereotype causes you to do bad. And this has been done in so many ways and so subtle. Like simply by telling, so they did another study where they just simply remind the African American students that they were African American. They didn't even tell them that it would make them worse in the math. And then they did worse in the math.
Or what about like the example with the professor not necessarily telling the student that they're a good student, but just giving them more attention and like more support?
Yeah, I mean, so that's in general how self-fulfilling prophecy can cause stereotypes to come true. Stereotype threat is a specific example of that. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Self-fulfilling prophecy can work in many ways. So many things cause prejudice. One concept that I want to talk about is institutionalized racism and sexism. And so, does anyone know what is? I don't want to explain what institutional racism is, or institutional sexism or racism. These are like not always illegal, but many times legal structures in society that cause people from a certain minority group to not have as good of a shot in society. I think I have a video here from Colbert Report. Remember we talked about in-group, out-group? You know, all 7 of you that were here that day. So an in-group bias is like a positive feeling or like special treatment that we reserve for people who we consider to be part of our own group. And as well as the opposite, we have negative and unfair treatment of people who we consider to be outside of our group. Okay, and the way that this, one reason why this is so important for prejudice is this idea of outgroup homogeneity. So outgroup homogeneity is our tendency to see people who are in our outgroup as not diverse, okay? But our tendency to see people in our in-group as very diverse. So can you guys see how this would be really harmful for, you know, how this could cause prejudice, like using schemas and stereotypes? Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I see one person from a certain group, like doing something bad, okay, and they're not in my out group. I mean, they're not in my in group. They are in my out group. And because I assume everyone in my out group to be really similar to each other, then that like negative attribution spreads to everyone. Like they all do that. Okay. But if someone in my in group does something messed up, I don't do that. I don't just assign it to everyone because I think that people in my in group are diverse and different. That's clear. I'm confident in myself right now. I shouldn't be, but I am with that slide. So there's this know what ultimate attribution error is. So we talked about all different kinds of attributions when we talked about attribution theory, fundamental attribution error, self-serving biases. So ultimate attribution error is when we make we attribute some kind of behavior to someone's personality across an entire group. Okay, and it's usually like a negative evaluation. Okay, so remember we can blame the situation, or we can blame the person for making an attribution. Okay, when we make the ultimate attribution errors, someone does something negative. Instead of blaming the situation, we blame the person. Okay, but then we take it one step farther. We assume that everyone in the group acts the same way. And relatedly, Bodenhausen in 1988, they did these mock trials, kind of, where they gave people like a description of like a defendant, and they asked them if they thought they were guilty or not. They were more likely to find that person guilty if his name was Carlos Ramirez than if it was Robert Johnson.
Bless you.
Thank you. We also do victim blaming, and that's when we blame an individual for their victimization. And it's because people want to see the world as fair. They don't want to think that, something bad that happened to someone else could also happen to them. So they just assume that it was the victim's fault. They tell themselves it was the victim's fault in order to live in less fear. And this is kind of related to cognitive dissonance. So we have an idea about our concept of the world is that it's fair. It's a fair world. Okay. And then when something bad happens to someone, that threatens our concept about the world being fair. Okay. And it makes us feel uncomfortable. Okay. It's dissonant information. And so we resolve that dissonance by blaming the victim. Okay, well, the victim did something wrong. The world is still fair. There's studies that showed that prejudice amongst two different groups can be lessened under 6 conditions. So if you bring together, and I'll show you a video that'll put this into context, 2 different groups that have strong stereotypes against each other, these 6 conditions can reduce prejudice. So first you need to induce mutual interdependence, a situation where both groups depend on each other to achieve a common goal. And that goal has to be important to both of them, and each person in the group needs to have equal status. informal interpersonal contact. Okay, so people like informally talking to each other on a regular basis. Multiple contacts with people from the other group, and social norms that promote equality. Let me show you video. Good one. Someone showed it to me last year.